Hello and welcome to this discussion on the project that we're calling Legions Imperialis 40k. My name's Gordon, I'm the regular host of Life of Die, and I'm joined by my regular epic partner in crime, Craig. How you doing, Craig?
I'm good, thanks.
Good stuff. Well, the reason that we're having this conversation is that we have a playtest battle report going live on our channel, and as a bit of a preface to that, we wanted to share with the Legions Imperialis and the wider epic community what it is that we're doing and the reasons why we're doing it. For people who are new to the channel and not already aware, I thought it might be helpful to share a bit of our history with Epic over the years. Apologies to people who already know this, but we'll try and keep it as brief as possible.
Yeah, I got into Epic in its second edition incarnation, which would have been in 1991, 92, I think it was, when we got the starter set, and then more or less followed it through its lifespan up until about 1996, 97, and played, you just kind of had small armies, mostly me and my brother and a couple of friends that played it. We played with relatively small armies during that time period, but I kept up to date with all the releases and White Dwarf, and all that kind of thing. And then I think just as Epic 40k released in 1997, I was kind of getting out of the hobby anyway, and there was obviously kind of sweeping changes to it, so we all kind of felt a bit not down by it, but we kind of felt that was a good stopping point for us. We didn't really want to get involved in learning new rules or buying loads of new models and stuff, so yeah, we all kind of naturally just stopped at that point. And then fast forward to sort of 10 years ago, 2014 odd, I started getting back into the hobby again, just kind of reignited my interest, started looking up things on YouTube and blogs and stuff, and then I came across the TAC Command forums, I think it was, where I learned about NetEpic, and I met yourself there, and because we both lived in Glasgow, we arranged a few games, and I'd already started collecting a few nostalgia-driven armies by this point, and was able to start playing games with you, and yeah, that's where we started, and yep, and we've been playing, yeah, like I say, for about 10 years, fairly regularly at this point, and we've been playing Net Epic Gold for the most part, with a few tweaks and stuff along the way, and then obviously more recently I picked up the Legion Imperialis starter just at Christmas time there, and kind of knocked out the armies that came with that, added a few bits and bobs to it, and we've played 3 games of that so far.
All of which were really fun.
Yeah, no, it was great fun, yeah, and I really enjoyed it. What about yourself?
Yeah, I had a fairly similar experience to you, but I did get into Epic a bit earlier than you did, because I had a copy of first edition Adeptus Satanicus, and then a few months later, when Space Marine was released, I picked that up as well, and that was the point where I really bought into the Epic experience. Just something about the scale and the scope of the battles that you could fight that really fed my imagination, and I really loved first edition at the time. The one issue with it, though, was that to play the kind of size of battles we wanted to, it really required playing the game over the course of a weekend. So yeah, the main reason for that was that the game had a lot of grit to it and detail, particularly in the start lines, and so I found it quite difficult to persuade many friends to play the game, certainly any more regularly than maybe once a month. I do remember when second edition was released that I was fairly horrified by how much had been stripped out and how much they simplified things. And I remember my initial response was that the game had been dumbed down. But the second I played the game, that just was forgotten about. It was the fact that everything was so lethal, things were getting wiped out very quickly compared to first edition, and it really sped the game up, and it meant suddenly we could play an entire game in an afternoon, which, believe me, after a couple of years of first edition, was just like a massive revelation to me at the time. I think it was around the time that Titan Legions came out that I pretty much fell away from the hobby. That said, I do remember we played a couple of times a year, and I remember one of my friends showing me an early version of NetEpic. I think it was maybe 1999 or possibly 2000. The two of us thought that the fans had created something that had really kept the essence of what was great about second edition, but they'd also improved the game. And so really from that point onwards, it was NetEpic that I was playing. I missed third edition altogether, and although I've heard good things about it, I have had a few games of Epic Armageddon. It was fine, and I don't want to put that down either, because I know there's loads of people who love Epic Armageddon as well. And I think it's great. We've all got different versions of the game that we love. But for me personally, I couldn't really see past second edition. As Craig mentioned, and thanks again to Tactical Command, we kind of connected through there and met up for a few games, became friends, and ever since we've been playing NetEpic Gold or some variation of that with our own house rules until the release of Legions Imperialis recently. one of the things we really enjoyed about Legions Imperialis was that it was built a lot on second edition, and it was probably because of that link and the fact that we always enjoyed tinkering with the rules. That probably led to this idea now of us playing Legions Imperialis 40k. So, Craig, what is Legions Imperialis 40k?
So yeah, we like I say, we both played 3 games of fairly vanilla Legions Imperialis just to get to grips with the rules and try out different points values, different objectives, that kind of thing. And yeah, I think we were both very happy with a lot of the core rule changes. There are certain aspects of second edition Epic and Net Epic by design that I had kind of issues with, and I think the more games I was playing of it, I wouldn't say I was getting frustrated with it, but I was kind of starting to get a bit sort of bored with the basic, 8 objectives in a table worth 5 VPs each kind of thing. And I wasn't a massive fan of the way you captured objectives. I felt that terrain could be a little bit kind of hit and miss with woods being effectively impenetrable fortresses, that kind of thing. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff in the core rules of Net Epic that I was starting to get a bit annoyed with. And Legion of Imperialis was a bit of a breath of fresh air because it obviously took that same core design from second edition Epic and enhanced it in my view and kind of modernized it a little bit. I think, well, I don't want to speak for you, but I think we both felt similarly that was there was a lot of good changes made with it, and it definitely played. We played a couple of really close games at kind of, it's like 600, 700 points up to 1500 points, and yeah, it seemed to play really well at that sort of points value. But we were finding it was taking a long time to play a game, and we weren't necessarily getting to the 5-turn prescribed limit, and we maybe weren't taking all of our secondary objectives into consideration. And yeah, it was just taking a long time to play a game, which was well below the kind of recommended game size. So that combined with the fact we already have massive epic armies for second edition or Net Epic, on the 6mm scale, I think both of us have each got almost everything, I would say. I mean, I can count on one hand probably the amount of units that I'm missing one of from that collection, and then as well as some, formware stuff and some third-party stuff to make up, like the Tau and AdMech and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think I'm probably about 100,000 points in old money of epic armies. So yeah, there's a massive collection there, and I didn't want to certainly leave them gathering dust. As well as that, collecting and building the Imperialis stuff is a little bit of a chore, maybe. The models look great. They're kind of a little bit fiddly to construct, and obviously there's just not much stuff released at the moment. Plus, I think neither of us are massively invested in the Horus Heresy universe. We both obviously are aware of it from playing first and second edition Epic when it was just a little bit of blurb text kind of to detail the reason that they had the same armies in the box, basically. And then it's been expanded on over the last 30 odd years with hundreds of books and lore, which I know a lot of people are massively into, but and again, I don't want to speak for you, but I think we are more interested in the variety of the races that you can play in the kind of 40k setting with the Orcs and Eldar and Chaos proper, that kind of thing. So yeah, missing out on that using vanilla Legions Imperialis is a little bit of a shame. And again, I'm sure they'll add more variety to it as the releases go along. But yeah, we wanted to get our toys out on the table again, but didn't necessarily want to go back to straight Net Epic either. We wanted to incorporate what we'd learned from Legions Imperialis into our games of Net Epic, essentially.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I don't want to throw too much shade at Legions Imperialis. I think it's an enjoyable game. We had some great games, and it's more really a practicality thing for me. I think a big part of it is my age. I was able to kind of soak up stats and things when I was a lot younger, and I find that a lot more challenging now. So yeah, it was all the new stat lines, all the kind of special rules. Yeah, I found that a bit difficult.
I think you've hit on the key thing as well, though. The Legions Imperialis core rules and the units are nicely divided in the rules, which is saying something. So the idea that we could just drop in our existing Net Epic armies into the Legion Imperialis core rules almost, straight on top of each other is not quite far from the truth, actually. We're kind of getting there with it. But yeah, the Legion Imperialis rules, unit rules as they stand, are a little bit laborious, lots of unit stats, lots of weapon choices to make to fit out your units, which I know some people absolutely love the idea of, the crunchiness of being able to model the sponsons on your predators as las cannons or heavy bolters, that kind of thing. But I think for us, again, maybe it's an age thing, but the abstraction that Net Epic brings and the simplification of these units definitely appeals to us, and because we know the stats already, we can get games in a lot quicker, rather than having to keep referring back to the rule books and looking at models and doing all that kind of thing. So,
Or as Yoda said, quicker, easier, more seductive. I think it was in the last few days, really, that I realised LI's stat lines are probably more like the detailed ones that I remember from first edition, but it was so long ago I can't remember clearly. But again, I think that was key to why I was finding Legions Imperialis was a bit slower to play than what we were doing with Net Epic. Not that Net Epic is short and grit, because there is plenty of options in Net Epic and second edition for that matter.
I mean, I really like the idea of having the granular unit stats, but just not at this scale, or not at the scale that we want to play at. I think Legion Imperialis, again, probably works really well at that 750,000 point range. And again, because the models are slightly bigger, then you're getting less in the table anyway, without it ending up being a bit of a car park. So yeah, I think you can play a smaller game, really enjoy the crunch and the detail, but Epic, or Net Epic as it is, just gives you that extra layer of zoom out and abstraction, which allows you to have more stuff on the table, bigger battlefields, but still play in the same sort of time frame.
Just to reiterate for Legions Imperialis players, that Net Epic stats and armies are more or less exactly the same as second edition. It was just a fan version.
Yeah, I think if you're coming in from second edition, having never played Net Epic, you can more or less port second edition into this as well. I don't think there's anything stopping that.
And also for second edition and Net Epic players who are not familiar with Legions Imperialis, it pretty much is the same basic rule set. You still have first fire, advance, and charge orders, with the addition of the march order and also the garrison rules for infantry and buildings, both of which I thought were really, really good. Those two changes really are the big ones, but I think that second edition and Net Epic players would understand most of what was happening in a Legions Imperialis battle report without having read the rules, and vice versa. I think Legions Imperialis players would probably be able to follow most of the action that was going on in our back catalogue of Net Epic battle reports. The turn sequence and the likes of how Close Assault works are virtually identical, which is why we thought mashing up both games to get the best out of both systems would be a good way to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like I say, having the unit stats essentially separate from the core rules has made it pretty easy just to drop in second edition armies or Net Epic armies without too much fiddling. But there has been a little bit of fiddling, which we can talk about.
Yeah. Let's get into the crunch then of exactly what we're doing. First thing to mention is that all of the army books, which have all the different 40k forces and stat lines, can be downloaded for free from netepic.org. If you're a second edition player and you still have all your cards and rule books, those will work just as well. We think both are completely interchangeable.
I'd go a step further as well. If you're coming into this brand new and you're expecting to find the Net Epic army lists being bang up to date with all the latest and greatest units from 40k, you might be a little bit disappointed. Yeah, I think development on that, on the kind of adding in new units to Net Epic, as we know it, stops around 8-10 years ago probably. So there is also the French group, the Net Epic Palladium project, which has been really going leaps and bounds with bringing in all the kind of latest and greatest units into essentially the Net Epic system. So yeah, it's worth having a look at them if you're more interested in playing the more modern, up-to-date units.
Yeah, good shout. For fans of Legions Imperialis then, what are we going to change about that system?
Yeah, so we're trying to avoid changing any core rules with Legions Imperialis, I guess. The list building aspect of it is slightly different because we're using the Net Epic armies. They're not divided into the formations that you find in Legions Imperialis, which are kind of more flexible, more kind of like real world force organization type army building. It's a bit more rigid in Net Epic, using the sort of predetermined detachment sizes and company cards. So what we're using as the analog for that is that a formation in Legions Imperialis essentially equates to a company card in Net Epic plus the up to 5 support cards you can attach to that, and the special card will be part of that formation as well, unless it's a Titan, and then we're just going to count it separately for the sake of kind of breakpoints and stuff like that to make things a little bit simpler.
Yep, and Praetorians would be treated like Titans in that respect as well.
Yeah. But the special cards like a Grand Warlord for the squats or a Warlock for the Eldar, that kind of thing, they can just be added into the company as normal. But yeah, for Titans and Praetorians, we've decided to split them out slightly just to avoid any gaming of the breakpoints, because obviously they're quite kind of high wind models, that kind of thing.
And the Titan and Praetorian rules are one of the main elements we are changing from Net Epic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so in Net Epic, obviously with Titans and Praetorians, they had the roll to hit template with the scattered dice and picking a location, that kind of thing, which I know a lot of people have massive fond memories for, but for ourselves it's a little bit long in the tooth now. We find it very, no pun intended, very hit and miss in terms of performance. It seems a bit daft that the biggest thing on the table can be incredibly hard to hit sometimes, and if you do hit it, sometimes it goes between its legs or whatever, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. My main gripe with that system was that the Scout Titans had fewer locations that could be targeted, which meant the scattered dice often saw what were hits become misses. Because the larger Titans had more locations that you could hit, it was easier to bring them down.
Yeah, I think we're finding the point. Every time you took a Warlord, it died, and every time you took a Scout Titan, it survived. So it was a bit flying in the face of the kind of intentions, I think. So yeah, what Legion Imperialis brought in was kind of a flat wounds system, essentially, to all units, with Titans just having more wounds, and that's all well and good. I think it works quite well. You lose a little bit of the flavour, I guess, of blowing a weapon off one of the arms or crippling it and halving its calf, but all of that stuff normally just kind of annoyed you, or ended up you forgot which weapon got blown off, or you forgot that to half its calf, or all these things.
More bookkeeping.
Yeah, it was just more bookkeeping, unnecessary bookkeeping. It slowed the game down, and it could end up you forgetting it. Your opponent forgets it. Then at the end of the game, you go, "Oh no, I shouldn't have done that," and then it kind of sours the taste. So going with wounds on the Net Epic Titans has been one of the bigger changes we've made, and we've play tested a couple of iterations when we've math hammered and theory crafted a few other ways of doing it, and we've kind of settled on a bit of a system now where you're effectively getting a wound per 100 points of the cost of your Titans. So typically, a Warlord will cost around 900 points, a Warhound will cost sort of 350, 400 once you've added on its weapons, because in Net Epic you pay for the weapons individually. So you can roughly equate that to one wound, and it feels about right at the moment.
I think for the playtest video, it was one wound for every 75 points.
Yeah, the initial playtest of the video was about to go up. We had it at either 75 points or 100 points, I can't remember, or 50 points, I think it was, maybe 75. But either way, it was a wee bit too much, and the Titans were kind of unstoppable. There was no chance of getting through to them, so yeah, we needed to nerf that a bit straight off the bat. We also toyed with the idea of a flat 1+ save for all Titans as well, just to avoid the idea of a lucky bolter shot stripping a wound off a Titan, which is kind of doesn't happen in Legions Imperialis because of the light and the AT distinctions. And then obviously we toyed with the idea of bringing in those to Net Epic or to whatever this is, but then that's getting into too much fiddling at that point. And although I fundamentally agree that there should be weapon stats for anti-tank and anti-personnel similar to the way they have got it in like Epic Armageddon or in other systems, other kind of historical games and stuff like that, it's breaking that nice bit of abstraction we've got at the moment. So I didn't want to mess with that too much. So what we've settled on after a few heated debates over Messenger is that we'll give a flat 1+ save to like battle class Titans and Praetorians. So that's like Reaver and above, and then Scout Titans like Revenants and Warhounds. We'll give them a 2+ save on their armor. So yeah, it does still mean there's chances of stray bolter shots, and then likewise if you're firing at a battle class Titan, a Reaver Titan from behind with a bolter, you've still got a chance because it'll be down to a 2+ save at that point if you're through to its armor. So yeah, there's still the chance of a heroic lone guardsman las gunning a Titan to death in the back, but the scenario where you let that happen is
it's on you.
Add Titan ownership. Yeah, exactly. It's if it gets to that stage, then you deserve it, I think, is what we've concluded. Much in the same way that it's kind of possible in Legions Imperialis to take down Titans in close combat with infantry. It will be in this case as well because those same rules apply, but you're having to sacrifice a lot to get there and not guarantee it. So
I should mention, as a 2nd edition veteran, it was always a favourite tactic of mine to swarm bikes around Titans in engagement close combat. You would find that you would lose like 5 or 6 of them, but every attack thereafter, more or less, not depending on your rolls, but most of the time you would start inflicting like automatic damage rolls on the Titans and pretty routinely bring them down as a result. So I think it's a good thing that in Legions Imperialis you can only roll a maximum of 66 in any given round of close combat, so it prevents that kind of swarming tactic, which was just it was a bit silly, really.
Yeah, and there's always a chance on a 6 it would just explode as well.
Exactly.
Also, if you win a combat against a Titan miraculously with, massed infantry, it will just take a wind off. Unless you're throwing everything at a Titan on its last leg, so to speak, then you might sacrifice a dozen stands of infantry to take a wind off, that kind of thing. Also, you're limited by the amount of guys you can get round its base as well, of course, which kind of brings back that nice idea of having sort of screening forces or Ranger Titans, security forces, that kind of thing, like the Skitari and the Admech would do. So yeah, I like it. I think it's flavorful enough. We're obviously still counting a Titan as broken when it halves its wounds, so at that point it'll only be able to take charge in advance order. So you're kind of still representing that idea that it's losing its ability to operate as it goes down in wounds. So yeah, it feels about right for me. We obviously need to playtest it a little bit more, but I'm thinking we're both quite happy with it as that stands.
Just to add about the justification for giving the Scout Titans a 2+ save, we both thought about it, and most of the damage locations on the Scout Titans in Net Epic were 2+ or 3+. Also, Land Raiders are a 2+ save in Net Epic, which feels like it might have similar armour to those lighter Titans. Most importantly, though, after years of defaulting to Warhounds and Revenant Titans, we wanted to give players extra incentive to gravitate towards taking the likes of the Warlord Titans or Warlock Titans for the Eldar. Those the biggest ones you possibly could. They always were meant to dominate the game, and we're hoping that that's going to be the outcome there.
Yeah, and it brings us on to, well, we can sort of skip back and forth, I guess, but one of the other changes we've made is obviously in Legions Imperialis there's the Engine Killer special rule for weapons, which is really designed for taking out Titans. So it's things like your Volcano Cannons will do Engine Killer brackets 4 or whatever it is, or brackets 3, I think it is, damage, which means when you score a successful hit and they fail their save roll, then it'll do effectively 4 hits, so you can one-shot a Warhound if you've already stripped its shields, and that's really thematic and it's really accurate to the lore and all that kind of good stuff. So we want to try and keep that in. And obviously in Net Epic there's the penetrating special rule, which some weapons have, like Volcano Cannons, which we can essentially just swap out 1 for 1. So in Net Epic you've got penetrating +3, I think it is, for a Volcano Cannon, and that'll just slot it straight into that role as doing those additional wounds.
Exactly. So you count the first hit as a wound, and then the penetrating stroke Engine Killer trait damage is added. So in the case of a Volcano Cannon, you could one-shot a Titan because you would inflict 4 wounds on it. And, as is the case in both Legions Imperialis and Net Epic, you still need weapons with a -1 modifier to strip those Void Shields. So if the Void Shields were already stripped, potentially, yes, you could take down a Titan with guys with bolters alone. However, you would need a massive amount of luck to land all the hits, and your opponent would need a massive amount of terrible luck to be failing a 2+ save. It's not likely to happen, but let's just say it did happen. What would be the worst of it? Okay, you might be annoyed if you were the player that get taken down with a bolter, but your opponent, he's going to be cock a hoop. He's going to be. That's going to be like a memory for the rest of his epic life. Remember that time I took down a Warhound Titan with bolters? How cool would that be? So yeah, I think it's fair enough.
Exactly, yeah. So there's a few rules that actually overlap with Legions Imperialis and Net Epic to the point where they've got the same name, that kind of thing. So we've had to obviously do a little bit of fiddling there to make sure that we're using the right one and we're keeping the best bits of both, essentially. So we can talk about them when we kind of come to them. The only other big kind of core rule change I guess we've made to Net Epic in this case is to LI, sorry, in this case is the barrage weapons. Yeah, we discovered quite quickly, because this is the fun of playtesting and the kind of bouncing off ideas, is that we thought, wouldn't it be great if you could just not bother with templates anymore, but not having to bother about meticulously making sure your guys are spread out 6 centimeters apart, and that if we could just say, that barrage weapons hitting your unit, then you get as many hits as you've got guys in that unit, that kind of thing.
That's how it works in Legions Imperialis, while in Net Epic you use a template to determine who's hit. And that reference Craig is making to making sure models were as far apart as possible was to ensure that the template weapons inflicted hits on as few models as possible. Kind of meant we were playing a bit of a mini game about trying to position our troops just as far apart as possible, so that we wouldn't lose as many if a barrage came in on us. Again, it slowed play, so we were really desperate for the way Legions Imperialis deals with it to work.
But yeah, it just didn't quite work. So yeah, we've discovered that there's reasons for doing these things. So we're back to having, you get the number of hits, or you get the number of units that you can fit under the template is the number of hits you're going to roll for that. But then once you incur wounds, the player incurring those wounds can choose which units get removed. So it still avoids any HQ sniping with artillery, that kind of thing, which used to go on. Well, it didn't used to go on with Net Epic because there's certain rules about not targeting HQ units, which also didn't make a massive amount of sense a lot of the time, and it allowed a bit of gamemanship from the other player to essentially use their HQ units as deterrents from being targeted, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think where we've arrived at this compromise is really decent. We're still replicating that artillery barrage template and getting all that kind of stuff in, but we're just making it a little bit fairer in terms of what units get removed.
And just to clarify about the removal of casualties from a barrage, normally in Net Epic only models under a template could be killed, but Legions Imperialis allows the owning player to choose which models in a unit die. We're keeping that, so it does mean that if the owning player chooses, some models from the same unit which were not under the template may be chosen to be hit and removed if their saves are failed. So again, we're trying to stay as close as we can to Legion Imperialis' core rules as possible here.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes as far as, say you had a character unit in there with a fixed 6+ save and the rest of the guys in the unit were 0 saves. You could potentially tank the hits on that guy with a 6+ save if you really wanted to. It's more about, the number of hits that you're rolling for, but generally speaking that means your character unit's probably going to die, but you might save a couple of his minions from dying instead. So it gives you these options of how you want to allocate the hits essentially. The only difference with that would be units inside a building. So if you target units inside a building with a barrage weapon, then everyone in that building will potentially take a hit. So it helps balance things out a little bit with the power of garrisoning buildings and the risk that, if something high explosive hits that building, then it's, even if it doesn't destroy the building or damage the building, it's certainly going to give the people inside that building a miserable time.
For the benefit of Net Epic fans, do you want to explain about how the garrison rules work?
Yeah, briefly. I mean, I'm kind of hoping that everyone will be Legion Imperialis well versed at this point, but if not, then yeah, garrisoning buildings allows you to get half your models up to the edge of a building and then they kind of get sucked into the building. And at this point, they're thought to be all around the building. There's no facing out of certain windows or, that kind of thing that you measure from the building for all shots at that point.
And you can fire from any facing of the building.
Yeah, and the same for like close combat. If you engage people in the building in close combat, everyone's engaged in that building. So it saves you having to, gaming it, leaving your HQ unit in the middle or something like that. So yeah, it's quite nice. Simplifies things a lot. There's lots of things like that we've really enjoyed about Legions Imperialis rules, and not having to take 5 centimeters off the movement for getting into a building, that kind of thing just bogs the game down. So yeah, it's been some really nice changes.
An infantry in a march order can make a triple move. That's another big change, a big important change, which I think will help the likes of Chaos Forces, who I always found struggled to get into the fight because they had a lot of foot soldiers.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest changes. Infantry in general in the Legion Imperialis core rules are very powerful. They are necessary beyond everything else, especially the way objectives are captured in Legion Imperialis, that infantry effectively count as 5 strength versus a tank, which is I think 1 strength or 2 strength. So for holding objectives, infantry are key. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more infantry used, which is great because, like I say, we're both these huge collections. So if it does encourage us to get models out on the table that we wouldn't normally bring because they're now maybe slightly more viable, then I'm all for it. Like in the report you're about to see, I took Eldar Guardians for the first time in decades because, I mean, no spoilers, but they didn't do a huge amount, but at the same time they had the potential to do a lot. Yeah, so it gives those classic 10 centimeter move, 5+ to hit, 0 target save modifier, 0 save guys that we have maligned for years and moaned about on podcasts. It suddenly makes them king of the castle and front and center again, which is great because that's how it should be. This is a combined arms game, and having infantry in there playing a key role is massive. Obviously, there's slight concerns that we might be putting tanks not out to pasture, but certainly making them less useful. But I think that's also something that I'm hearing from the Legions Imperialis feedback from the recent tournaments and stuff like that tanks are, again, very, very hit and miss in terms of their abilities versus just taking loads of infantry. So we're kind of still in line with that at the moment, but we can work on that if we want to try and give tanks a bit more of a role to play.
Well, even if we just give them a slightly higher tactical value.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, something like that might be what we do. But yeah, I guess the kind of rules of doing anything like this, any kind of iterative process or any kind of continuous improvement process, to use my software development parlance. We make a change, we'll play it, we'll test it out, then we'll move on to the next thing, and not try to change too much too soon or too quickly to avoid weird variables creeping in, I guess, is what we should probably be doing.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to minimise changes. And even though it didn't work out, trying to keep the barrage rules exactly as they were in Legions Imperialis is an example of us trying to do that.
Yeah, there's been some things like that we've just had to address straight off the bat. And then there's a lot more things that we were just like, because we're obviously taking this as an opportunity as well, just to tweak some things that have irked us for years, maybe about NetEpic as well, or whatever. But we're trying to introduce them sort of slightly differently and separate them out so that we can, if someone wanted to take this just as a real starter for 10 and drop their NetEpic or second edition armies into it, they could do it with just taking these, more or less just those two big changes for Titan Wounds and Barrages, that they could pretty much get going with that. Everything else is kind of just flavour and fluff that we're adding in to make things a bit more interesting for us, I think. I mean, we can drop the details in if anyone wants to take a look at the document at some point once it's maybe ready for consumption. But yeah, most of the stuff we've changed after that is just clarifying a few things, because like I say, there are quite a few duplicate rules. Like the flyer rules in Legions Imperialis are kind of much improved, I think. I think that most of the complaints about flyers in Legions Imperialis are the unit stats again, so I'm hoping that we can make flyers great again and use them again, because it's something that we've always had a bit of a gentleman's agreement not to bring them, or to at least discuss bringing flyers beforehand, because in second edition and Epic, flyers are kind of a bit broken. They're almost impossible to kill unless you bring dedicated anti-aircraft or other flyers to kill them. They kind of operate without impunity. They're very powerful. They're quite expensive, but again, so is the anti-aircraft artillery. So you end up having this kind of side game or this meta game going on where if you bring flyers, I'm bringing anti-aircraft, and they just kind of cancel each other out, and it becomes a bit of a pointless exercise. Whereas I think in the Legions Imperialis core rules, flyers are a wee bit more vulnerable to kind of everything, and if you fly on a table like flyers do and they leave, I still think there's probably some tweaks to do there, maybe introducing something like the Epic 40k one where they take a turn to repair and refuel before coming back on, so you can't use them every single turn. Might be an option, but we can cross that bridge when we get there.
I think we should hold our hands up and admit that we haven't dealt with flyers yet. We're just trying to make sure that all the basics are running smoothly first.
Yeah, we only played them in Legions once, and that was just, you had one flyer and that was it. And we've not really played them in NetEpic for a while because we've had this kind of mutually assured destruction deterrence factor with them going on, where we just decided it's not worth the hassle. But I'm hoping that we can get them back in the game in a playable form, because it does, it's an important part of combined arms warfare, and it's something that I would like to see, but not for it to be a game-breaking addition. In addition to that, we've obviously there's rules for like jump pack troops and skimmers and transports, which are all the same word in NetEpic as they are in Legions Imperialis, but they mean slightly different things. So we've tried to take the best of both worlds. So like for skimmers, when they do their pop-up attack, they stay up for the duration of that phase rather than just for the next activation and then they drop down again. So it makes them a little bit more vulnerable when they're popped up, because they were very overpowered, or they are very overpowered in NetEpic currently. And you can only shoot them in first fire orders, I think, as well, because they're only up for that. Well, I suppose they're only up for that phase, so you still only shoot them in first fire orders. But yeah, they were a wee bit too powerful, I think.
And in fairness, that was a change NetEpic made to second edition.
Yeah.
In second, it was always the case that you remained popped up for the remainder of the first fire phase. So I think it is actually one of the places NetEpic made a wee bit of a misstep. I'm quite happy to see that back that way, yeah.
Aye. One of the other things we made was super heavies. So in super heavies in NetEpic, in second edition, there really wasn't that kind of concept. It was just like a 1+ save for like a Stormhammer or something like that, and it would just die if you failed it. NetEpic introduced that super heavy damage chart where you essentially had to roll a chart after you wounded one, and if it was a 1 to 3, it wounded it, damaged it, and if it was a 4, 5, 6, it killed it.
And a roll of 1 was actually a no effect.
No effect, yeah. So you had that kind of frustrating thing. It was, again, we're trying to avoid having charts and templates as much as possible for these sort of things. So yeah, we just give them 2 wins, just like in Legions Imperialis with your Malcadors and your Kratoses. Just give them 2 wins, and that seems to solve all of that stuff. We've not play tested with everything. We might find that there's some things out there that don't need 2 wins or do need 2 wins, but we can cross those bridges when we get there. Knights are the one thing that's sticking in my head about potentially giving them 2 wins where they don't have it at the moment, but yeah, we'll think about that. Transport is the other one. So Legions has quite granular transport rules where you've got assault transports and heavy transports and normal transports, and it determines what sort of units they can carry, and it determines whether units can charge out of them or they have to advance out of them, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, there's not the equivalency in the Epic. In the Epic, it's just the transport capacity, and there's kind of rules about you can't put Terminators and Rhinos, that kind of thing, which has always been there. But yeah, we've decided just to kind of simplify that. We're taking the core transport rules from Legions, where you move your transport first, you disembark your troops, and then your troops activate in another activation. But we're giving them the ability to have charge or advance orders coming out of the transport, regardless of whether it's a Rhino or a Land Raider or whatever. And I think that'll work quite well without having to, again, bog down unit stats with different types of transports. I think that's all of the main changes, really. We've got some, like I say, we've got some faction-specific stuff, but there's not much point in going through that at the moment because that's all kind of subject to change, I guess, at the moment.
I'd like to mention about your idea about HQ units. Legions Imperialis doesn't have the HQ units who can perform a charge move, but then a first fire as second edition, and Net Epic does. And you came up with the suggestion that HQ units can be replaced by the likes of medics, chaplains, or tech marines.
It didn't really make much sense to me, certainly, that just because this guy's a commander, he can move double and shoot straight away. I like the command abilities that they do have, where it's maybe it bumps up their morale by 1 if they're within coherency of them, or Legions has that other rule, Master Tactician, where you can change the order of another unit nearby you, and that makes flavorful sense to me. But also I think, in Legions, the Space Marine commander also has a medic on his stand, so you gain the medic rule, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a good way of getting these characters back on the table that we wouldn't normally want to take, because it's just extra points that we wouldn't necessarily spend because we're both power gamers. So or not really, but yeah, it gets these guys out in the field. It's more in line with the lore where HQ units can be chaplains, librarians, that kind of thing. It's not always just a commander. These guys are kind of senior roles, so they do lead companies. And yeah, it's a good way of not having to mess with the points costs, because we're taking away that command ability. We would, by definition, probably have to reduce the costs of things to make them balanced. But this way, it gives us the ability to do that, and it adds a bit more flavour to the game, I think, having these guys in there.
Yeah, it's cool.
We'll see how it works. We'll see if you break it.
As always, I'll do my best.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. I mean, I'm sure we're not the only geniuses working on this, and it may be that there's something else that comes out on a similar note to this. But yeah, I think, like I say, I think we're more than qualified to do this. We're both rules tinkerers by our nature, and we've both got a ton of experience with Net Epic and a little bit of experience with Legion. So I think what we're doing certainly feels right to me. So far.
The Epic community may beg to differ.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
And as you touched upon earlier, Legions Imperialis has different types of scenario rather than second, which was always about capturing objectives and breaking enemy units. I think the reason that I personally never really tired of that was because we had such variety of forces to use and play, and obviously the tabletop terrain always means you never scatter it the same way twice, so it always felt quite novel to me every time I played. But I can understand why that might have gotten the nerves after a while. But I think if we'd only had access to 2 forces, as is the case with Legions Imperialis currently, I think I would have tired of that a lot sooner. I think by combining the 2 systems, we're going to get the best of both worlds and the variety of units and forces at our disposal, alongside a number of different scenarios. I like that you roll for them, but I think it could be just as much fun to choose a mission ahead of a battle.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is something that's, from watching other content on Legions Imperialis, some people have got some problems with some of the scenarios and some of the combinations of scenarios and secondary objectives. We've obviously not played enough games to really hit that yet. We've only really done the 3 of them, so we might find similar results with this as well, that we just ignore some of the broken combos or some of the less fun to play combos. But yeah, having the option there of these different scenarios and layering in secondary objectives definitely gives a lot more life to the game.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Well, I think we've talked longer about this than we originally planned.
Yeah, so just to wrap things up, essentially we're just dropping Net Epic 2nd edition armies onto Legions Imperialis and taking it from there. And you can see our first attempt at this in a battle report, but just be warned, we've already made quite a few changes to it since then, because that was a real first kick of the ball.
Yes, and as well as new rules, we're testing the limits of our new mics as well. So the report is a little rough around the edges. Future reports will be more polished, but we thought it was worthwhile documenting this one for posterity. It's just the start of a long journey, and we're interested to see where this will take us. So it's nice to have that record of the beginning as well.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting process, and looking forward to it, more or less just to get more games in. But also looking forward to the process of tweaking these rules and seeing if anyone else contributes or has any ideas that they're willing to throw in. We can take a look at them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Please do let us know what you think. So I think we'll leave it there for now, but please remember to check out that new report. And as always, please consider commenting, liking, and most of all, subscribing, and keep on living the life of Die.